Hey, hope you're doing well today. Thanks for taking a minute to watch our new LifeGroup video for this week. As we record this, we're all just coming back from the holidays, so it's been good to see everybody get back. Had a lot of people on campus and anticipate that to continue on. So thank you again for watching this, and thank you for teaching. This week, we continue in John 7, and we're going to be covering verses 14 through 29 today. So we're going to be talking about a few things today, specifically authority, motivations, and identity of Jesus. One idea for kicking off your lesson, if you're looking for a way to get some discussion going, get some people talking, loosen people up, get their brains working a little bit, you might ask them something that you could write on the board, or you could just ask them this question. So ask for the 3 top reasons that you would accept someone as a teacher. And the opposite of that, what are 3 reasons you would deny someone as a teacher? Sometimes it's good to put a number when you ask a question like that instead of just saying, what are some reasons? If you say 3, sometimes that gives people something to shoot for. You may get some more responses. So what are top 3 reasons you would accept or deny someone as a teacher? And then we've all had teachers. We've been in school, been around a lot of different people. So another question that you could ask, building off of that is, ask 3 people to share about a teacher who's impacted their life. Maybe they've impacted it in a positive or negative way. And when I say teacher, if people can't think of a school teacher, they might think of a coach or even a pastor or a teacher at church, not necessarily just a school teacher. So that might be some ways that you can get people thinking and talking as we go into this. So I want to help set up the context of our passage a little bit. Jesus, through the book of John so far, he'd been teaching, healing, performing miracles, feeding thousands of people, but a certain time had not yet come. And as we go into Jesus chapter 7, it was a time for the Feast of Booths, Tabernacle, Shelter, and it was time for them to go. His brothers said, let's go. And we don't know their motivations, that they could have been saying in a way, hey, let's go see if you're really who you say you are. And they also could have been saying, let's see what kind of a social, political thing is going to do to see what's in it for them. So we don't really know. But they were wanting him to go. But Jesus said in John 7, verse 6, he said, my time is not yet here, but your time is always opportune. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its deeds are evil. And then he goes on in verse 8, he says, go up to the feast yourselves. I do not go up to this feast because my time has not yet fully come. So there was this feast going on, and I don't know how familiar you are with the different feasts in the Bible. It's an interesting study. But what was going on, sometimes this is called a Feast of Booths, Tabernacles, Shelters. But this is something that Jews did, and it was to commemorate and help them remember the time that they wandered. And so if you were living outside the city for a week, they would build a shelter, and they would dwell in that shelter for the week. If they lived in the city, they would build some kind of a structure on their rooftop. But the whole idea was to give them a visual to teach them and help them remember about God delivering them and their wandering. And so it's an interesting time that God chose to use Jesus during this time of year. As they remember the time when they wandered in the desert, hoping to be delivered, now here comes their deliverer. And so they were celebrating this feast. And one side note, something that we're going to talk about more in the future in different ways to teach, but this is a great example of how God used visual, hands-on, tangible things to teach people. He could have very easily just told them to read about what happened before and remember it, but this was a way that they were really going to get it, that they would see it, they would smell it, touch it, and it would really hit home. So they would go through this, and this is even something later on in John 7, 37 through 38, when Jesus talks about drink, when he talks about being light in chapter 8, verse 12. These are things that were going on around him that he was using to make a point. Sometimes we lose that when we read about that. So that's in chapter 7, verses 37 through 38, and chapter 8, verse 12. So he told him that his time had not yet come. And then we jump to verse 10, and he says, "But when his brothers had gone up to the feast, and he himself went up, not publicly, but as it were, in secret." So Jesus had just told his brothers that, "You guys go, it's not my time, I'm not going." And then we see that he did go. So we have to believe and know that he had gotten permission. He was told from the Father that it's now time to go up to the feast. So in 14, it says that, "But when he was now in the midst of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple, and he began to teach." So this starts kind of the first of three sections in our lesson for this week. And the first is of authority. Jesus talked about the authority that he had. So he began to teach. The Jews were astonished, saying, "How has this man become so educated? How does he know so much?" And Jesus answered them and said, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me." See, Jesus was explaining to them his authority. So authority is something that we may not think a lot about when it comes to a teacher. We walk into a worship service, into a life group room, into a school room, and there's a teacher there and there's someone's talking. But have you ever thought about, why do we listen to them? What gives them the permission to speak on a subject? Well, authority has been given to that teacher by some body, maybe a college. The school has endorsed them. They have vetted them. They know that they have the ability and the knowledge and the background, the teaching, to talk about what they need to talk about. And Jesus said, "Look, I'm not here because of anything that you know that I've went through in my life. I'm here because of him who sent me." So he was coming on his own authority in obedience to and following everything that the Father had for him. Another verse that kind of bookends the section for this week, he said that he's been telling them before that you do not know him, but he says in verse 29, he says, "I know him," talking about God the Father. "I know him because I'm from him, and he sent me." So Jesus explains to them how he has the ability to teach and why he has authority to teach. And then he gives a great response also in 17 and 18 that kind of help us judge what a teacher should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. In 17, he says, "If anyone is willing to do his will, he will know of the teaching, whether it is of God or whether I speak from myself. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him, he is true, there is no unrighteousness in him." So what a teacher of God's word, someone sent from God, should be doing is not pointing people to themselves, seeking to glorify themselves. They should be pointing people to God and seeking to bring him glory. So if you're looking for a filter, some benchmarks to know if you should trust someone's teaching or not, Jesus gives us great direction there. And then we go into the next section, which really talks about hypocrisy. Okay, so Jesus had explained to them the authority that he's teaching on. And then in verse 19, he says, Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you carries out the law? Why do you seek to kill me? And the crowd answered, You have a demon. Who seeks to kill you? In verse 21, Jesus answered them, I did one deed, and you all marvel. For this reason Moses has given you circumcision, not because it is from Moses, but from the fathers. And on the Sabbath you circumcise a man. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses will not be broken, are you angry with me because I made an entire man well on the Sabbath? Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. Okay, so they were accusing Jesus, and of course we know that their motives were to corner him and make him look bad and give them a reason to arrest him, kill him. And so what the Jews were saying is, how do you heal and do things on the Sabbath? Why do you think that you have authority to break the Sabbath? And as Jesus does, he uses questions to flip things around. He told them in verse 19, did not Moses give you the law? And then why do you seek to kill me? So what he's talking about is that the Jews had been told that on the 8th day you are to circumcise boys. And if that happens to fall on the Sabbath, that's okay, because we're going to carry out the ceremonial healing of circumcision. And so that's okay even though it falls on the Sabbath. Well, Jesus was healing people on the Sabbath, and they were saying, how do you heal people on the Sabbath? Well, they were already doing what they were accusing Jesus of doing. So Jesus was calling out their hypocrisy in that moment. And obviously they had motives that weren't pure, and Jesus knew that. They consistently took the commands out of context. Of course, we know that they added lots of things to God's law, things that God never commanded. And they got away from the spirit of the law. And they were off base in that, obviously. And so we go through authority, we go through hypocrisy in this passage. And then in 25 through 29, we learn about Jesus' identity. In 25 through 29, the Bible says this, some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, is this not the man whom they are seeking to kill? Look, he's speaking publicly, and they're saying nothing to him. The rulers do not really know that this is the Christ, do they? However, we know where this man is from. But whenever the Christ may come, no one knows where he is from. Then Jesus cried out in the temple, teaching and saying, you both know me and know where I am from, and I have not come of myself. But he who sent me is true, whom you do not know. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. So there was confusion going on. So imagine the people that were around Jesus when this interaction was happening. There were observers who were saying, this man is obviously saying things that authorities don't like, but they're not taking him into their possession. They're not making him not speak. They're not taking him away. Do they really think that he's the Messiah? And then other people are saying, but we know this man. We know where he's from. When the Messiah comes, we're not going to know where he's from. So there was all this clamoring that was going on there. But we know that ultimately the reason that he wasn't taken away is because of what he said earlier, that this was about God's timing. And when it was God's timing for something to happen, it would happen. And it was not time for Jesus to enter into that part of his ministry yet to be taken away, for them to have their way in their minds with him. So that's why Jesus was not taken away. So there was some confusion there. But the three areas of your lesson are really about authority, hypocrisy, and identity of Jesus. So I think you've got an opportunity to create some discussion opportunities and talking about teaching, talking about authority. Some takeaways also from this that are really practical for your people is to follow an example of obedience. Now, obviously, we're not Jesus, and we're not going to do it as perfectly as he did, but he did nothing outside of what the Father told him to do. He did what he told him to do. He did it how he told him to do it, and he did it when he told him to do it. I mean, what a great example that is for us. That's something that you can talk about in your lesson, is how can we learn from Jesus? We can do what God tells us to do. We can do it how he tells us to do it, and we can do it when he tells us to do it. Just like we saw when Jesus said that my time has not yet come, and then his time came, we know that timing is important. Maybe you've had something to say to somebody at a certain time of your life, maybe with your husband or your wife, but it wasn't the right time to say it. There's a right thing to say, and there's a right time to say it. So I think that we can learn from that. And another thing to learn from is how to spot true teachers and false teachers. So thinking about authority and who has authority to teach, what better way to know what's true and to be able to spot a lie? What better way to know those things than by spending time with the one who gave us truth, the one who is truth? One of the ways, and you've probably heard this before, but one of the best ways to be able to spot a counterfeit bill, a $20 bill, $100 bill, is by knowing what a real one looks like. And we know that money today, there are lots of things in there, watermarks, strips of different material, lots of different things. And so what they teach people at banks, they teach them how a real piece of money looks. And they're so used to seeing that real piece of money that when that fake one comes through their drawer, however it comes across them, they spot it like that because they've spent 99.9% of their time dealing with real money. So how do we think we're going to spot a false teacher speaking false truths if we never spend any time in the truth? So as we're spending time in God's Word and learning and hearing from Him over and over and over again, day in and day out, in our own time and also in community and our life groups and under the preaching of the Word and corporate worship, when we encounter false teaching, it should jump out very clearly. It shouldn't be difficult to discern if that's the case. So those are two great takeaways that I think the people in your groups could get, is how to obey, the timing of obedience, and then also how to discern if people are false teachers or not. So I think our study in John has already been great. This week is going to be another valuable time for us in John 7. Thank you again for watching this video. If I can ever help you with a teaching question that you have, or maybe an idea, something where you want to get out of the box a little bit, would love to hear from you. And thank everybody for making these videos possible. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday. Thanks and have a good day.